Walker, think about the people who greeted you when you joined the military. I remember my drill instructor. He made it very clear that my pain was of little concern to him. I do not want to hear your belly aching about being hungry, being tired, being cold. He was also the man who taught me to stand at attention. Remember learning that? It seems simple now. You stand with your body straight, your chest up, heels touching, hands at your sides, your gaze fixed forward. And, this is surprisingly hard for the novice, you do all of this even when you have a bead of sweat running down your face. The sweat is a nuisance. But, and we learned this fast, you do not address that nuisance by wiping the sweat away. You do not raise your hand and say, "Hey, sir, I've got a bead of sweat running down my face. It's making me kinda uncomfortable. Can we talk about it?" You stand at attention and ignore the sweat. Many of life's annoyances just have to be ignored. That doesn't mean that we suppress, ignore, or deny every pain. Serious pain has to be confronted. But one mark of resilience is learning to tell which pain deserves our attention. Paying attention to every pain, all the time, doesn't lead to resilience. It usually just leads to whining. So which pain matters? Start with this: not all pain matters. There are people whose attention is consistently drawn away from their purpose and toward their pain, like a moth to a light. Such people, who pay attention to every annoyance and obstacle in their way, are usually unsuccessful in their endeavors. In extreme cases they are mentally ill. A healthy person, a flourishing person, learns to move past a lot of annoyance and a good deal of pain. The soldier standing at attention must learn to ignore the bead of sweat running down his face. That is true. For 9,999 out of every 10,000 people who practice a discipline in its early stages, that is the right thing to do, and it's a fine way to explain what must be done. But to achieve mastery at the outer edges of excellence, and to achieve precision in our thinking, we have to unpack the word ignore. If I am ignoring something, I am aware of it. I am aware of it as an announce or perhaps as an irrelevance. Yet in order for me to ignore something, I am both aware and choosing not to focus my mind and my time on what I am ignoring. This is a good, important initial step. If we can learn to ignore things that don't matter much, we have made a lot of progress. But we often trip up when we think about the next steps. Truly great performers will often tell you that they don't even notice the pain. You probably know from experience that this happens sometimes. Adrenaline is a great gift. Adrenaline blasts, blood pumps, our focus narrows, and we literally don't notice things that ail us. But at the outer edges of excellence, we develop a more finely tuned awareness. At the outer edges of excellence, the trained soldier is aware of the bead of sweat, just as the athlete is aware of pain, because they are the pain. This sounds abstract and almost spiritual, because, well, it is. In true mastery there is a transcendence at work. You actually are your pain. Your pain is not something separate from yourself, something you overcome or ignore or fail to notice. It is a part of who you are. And even this is not quite right, it is who you are, as much as your own thoughts and your breathing. Your pain is no longer outside of you. It is you, and you are it. And here we've bumped up against the limits of language. Many people have tried to describe this well, and I encourage you to read their words, which may serve you better than mine do here. But at the end of the day, you cannot know this by virtue of anyone's explanation. This is not the kind of knowledge that you can achieve by reading about it. You'll have to do it, and then be it. Do you remember when we were at U.S. Army Jump School at Fort Benning? After BUD/S, learning to jump from a plane felt like a vacation. I think somebody called it 3 days of instruction crammed into 3 weeks. We felt there was a ton of wasted time. One day we jocked up and then sat in the hangar, strapped into our parachutes, for hours, and hours. And hours. I can't quite remember why. I remember that Eddie said they did it for motivation, after sitting and waiting for that long and that much uncomfortable gear, surrounded by that many stinking guys, you'd jump from the plane without a chute. At the end of an 8-hour day that seemed mostly like nonsense, you and I went to the gym and worked out. While we were lifting, we decided that we were ready to try a new max, so we both put more weight on the bar than we'd ever lifted before. But let's be more precise. We put on a little more weight, 2.5 pounds more, than we'd lifted before. We pushed ourselves, but we weren't stupid about it. And there's a more general lesson here. You don't have to push yourself to a new max every day. That's a recipe for injury. But you do have to push yourself. You do have to step beyond the boundary of your past experience. You do have to regularly and consistently pursue excellence at the edge. And you especially have to do it when you find that the world is giving you excuses to sit and do nothing. At the same time, there's a right way and a wrong way to push yourself. If you load a bar with a lot more weight than you've ever handled, you're going to hurt yourself. When you wake up and decide to do something crazy, you often end up in the hospital, or at least in a state of exhaustion and discouragements. Resilient people take risks. They might take big risks. But, as ever, there's a line between courage and stupidity. It's easy to do something crazy and hurt yourself. That's plain dumb. It's much harder, and also more valuable, to train and practice and prepare, and then push yourself just enough. Several ancient authors make analogies to wind and fire and wood. A small flame grows with a whisper of air but is extinguished by a strong wind. A wheelbarrow of wood will smother a flicker but feed a raging fire. You fuel your excellence with challenges made to match you in the moment. When we exercise vigorously, some physiologists believe that we actually tear our muscles at a microscopic level. When we rest and nourish and heal, our bodies repair the tears and we become stronger. If the muscles are torn too much, we are injured. If they do not tear enough, there is no growth. If they tear the right amount, and then we recover in the right way, we find that we've become stronger. Just as the athlete moves through muscular pain to become stronger, we can move through emotional and psychological pain to become stronger and grow wiser. But, and I want to emphasize this, we do not grow because of the pain. We grow when we recover from the right pain in the right way. To recognize the value in hardship, or to appreciate that kind of achievement requires suffering, is different from praising pain for its own sake. A boxer doesn't just take punishment in the ring. He tries to take as little as possible. Think about the phrase "roll with the punches." People who don't know boxing think that the phrase means something like, you get punched and you keep going. In fact, to roll with the punches means to twist your body, maybe even to slide slightly, so that the blow doesn't catch you full force. That's the idea of rolling with the punches. There is no virtue in taking punishment for the sake of punishment. I try to remind myself, push yourself, but don't be an idiot. There's a difference between pain and suffering. You often don't have a choice when it comes to feeling pain. You often do have a choice about whether you suffer, because suffering is created by your perception of, and relationship to, pain. Walker, think back to when you dived for abalone as a kid. Each time you broke the surface, your muscles were sore, your lungs burned, you panted for breath. Physically speaking, you were in pain. But were you suffering? No, it's one of your happiest memories. Consider this, one of the quickest ways for a medic to snap somebody out of her suffering is to ask her to describe her pain. You've done this with your kids when they're screaming. You ask them to tell you what's hurting them, and the mere act of having to breathe in order to speak slows their screaming. Then, describing what hurts forces them to step outside their pain and look at it. They might still be hurting, but they're calmer now. What happens is simple. And it works in most situations. To describe your pain, you have to metaphorically step outside of it. You have to look at it, analyze it. Instead of being in pain, you are not thinking about what the pain is doing to you. What's happened, at the most basic level, is that you've changed your relationship to pain. The pain might still be piercing. But by describing it, we see our pain. What happens, and this is true whether the pain we feel is from a knife wound, hunger, or a dearly loved relative's death, is that deliberate attention to pain helps us separate the physical sensation from the suffering we mentally attach to that sensation. What's true about pain in this sense is similar to what's true about fear. It does its worst work when it's hidden. The minute we write down what we are afraid of, or take objective stock of what's hurting us, we begin to gain control. There is a difference between recognizing that pain is real and believing that pain must always be devastating. Losing a friend in battle is always bad. Losing a brother in an accident is always bad. Losing a child to disease is always bad. To be abused as a child is always bad. But when we approach people who have been hurt with the belief that they will necessarily be broken, we do them a double injury. Many people will hurt for some time. Many people will be traumatized. Some scars will be carried for a lifetime. But not everyone who's been beaten will be broken. And usually, no matter how harsh the hardship, there is the possibility of light on the other side. To recognize that it's possible for people to endure abuse, violence, or the untimely death of someone they love isn't to deny the tragedy of what they have experienced, which would be unhealthy and impossible for them to do in any case. It is, in fact, to offer them the one thing they may most need when the world looks as if it's all a catastrophe, hope rooted in reality. When I was in Iraq, one of the SEALs I shared desk duty with was a Tier 1 sniper. He was recovering from an injury and reading Thich Nhat Hanh at the time. I know, a sniper reading a Zen Buddhist. It was one of the things I enjoyed about the SEAL teams. It reminds me of a quotation about the Greeks from Edith Hamilton, that they were lovers of beauty without having lost the taste for simplicity, and lovers of wisdom without loss of manly vigor. Thich Nhat Hanh writes that suffering is something we create through our attachments. What makes people suffer is not so much the physical sensation they experience, but the meaning they attach to their losses. I believe that you can't live a flourishing life without attachments to people and purposeful work. But there is wisdom in recognizing that certain attachments can be unhealthy and cause us pain. And part of the art of living is knowing the who, what, when, where, how, and why of being attached. You've known people who choose to suffer even when they're not in much pain, obsessing over every little ache. You've also known people who choose not to suffer even when they are in great pain. They show us that we can recreate our relationship with pain. I know that sounds a bit abstract when you read it. But it's real when you live it. Seneca was a chronically ill man for much of his life. It didn't stop him from writing many letters on the good life that still make me sit up and pay attention. Epictetus, one of the most revered philosophy teachers of his day, was disabled from childhood in a world without wheelchairs, handicap ramps, and effective painkillers. My point is not that Seneca and Epictetus were legendary tough guys. They weren't. But they found ways to work with pain without letting it consume them. In their writings and their examples, they left us clues. They remind us that none of us need to be trapped in our suffering. Most profoundly, we can shape our relationship with pain by choosing the meaning we give to pain. At the extreme, consider martyrs tortured for their beliefs who experienced their pain as a profound religious experience. That doesn't justify their torture or make their pain any less. But the sufferer who sees himself as a martyr has found a way to give meaning to pain. My boxing coach Earl used to say, "You can't get better fighting someone who's worse than you." The painting Dempsey and Firpo, by George Bellows, hangs above my desk. In 1950, the Associated Press polled the leading sports editors in America to find out what they considered the greatest sports moment of the first half of the 20th century. They selected this punch, this moment from that fight, over all others. Largely forgotten today, that punch was thrown in 1923. Boxing was the dominant sport of the day. A crowd of 80,000 had come to New York's Polo Grounds to witness the contest for the heavyweight championship of the world. See the man falling through the ropes? That's Jack Dempsey. He won. Dempsey was boxing's superstar. The Manassa Mauler earned his nickname with crushing punches. That evening, Dempsey fought the towering Luis Angel Firpo, the wild bull of the Pampas, the first Argentinian ever to contend for the heavyweight crown. Toward the end of the first round, Firpo managed to pin Dempsey against the ropes. With a combination of vicious punches, he knocked Dempsey out of the ring. As Dempsey landed, the back of his head hit a reporter's typewriter, opening a serious gash. The ringside reporters shoved Dempsey back onto the canvas in time to beat the count. As Dempsey got his legs under him, Firpo quickly pounced, delivering another barrage of punches. Still wobbly, Dempsey was just able to fend Firpo off when the bell sounded to end the round. Dempsey had suffered the most dramatic knockdown of his career. Yet he came out of his corner furious to start the second round. In 57 seconds, he knocked Firpo out with a blow to the jaw. And then, as one writer put it, in a moment of almost heartbreaking pathos, the tiger of just seconds, before turned into a lamb, stooping down to help up his bloody, beaten foe, as the more than 80,000 in attendance at the Polo Grounds roared their approval. Before that night, Dempsey had been one of the sport's least popular champions. More often than not, spectators shouted for him to be knocked out. But that changed when the crowd saw him humbled, pushed to the limit of his ability, and still triumphant. It was Dempsey who defeated Firpo, but it was Firpo who made Dempsey an unforgettable champion. Dempsey became a legend not despite Firpo, but because of him. Just as Ali was great because of Frazier, Shakespeare was great because of Marlowe, and Raphael and Michelangelo pushed each other to new heights. We don't know what greatness we're capable of until we're tested. In boxing, we're challenged by an opponent. In life, we're more often challenged by a condition or a cause. When Mother Teresa started a school for the poor in a slum of India, she had no supplies and no classroom. She simply saw that there was need for a school. The fact that there was no building, no chairs or tables, did not deter her. On a small open patch among the shanties, she began to scratch the Bengali alphabet with a stick on the ground. A few more children appeared, and with each passing day, more and more children joined. In a spirit of community participation, someone donated a chair or two, a bench and a blackboard. Within a few days, the little school had become a reality. From these humble beginnings, Mother Teresa eventually made it possible for hundreds of thousands of the poor and uncared for in India to die with dignity. Walker, you won't be in a ring or in the streets of Calcutta, but you will need a worthy adversary. We all talk to ourselves. You may not speak your thoughts out loud or share them with others, but there is always a conversation in your head about your environment, the people around you, and, most important, about yourself. You can't shut this conversation off. The best you can do is turn it in your favor. There are times when our self-talk becomes destructive. I screwed up. I'm stupid. I don't deserve to be here. Everyone thinks like this occasionally, but repetitive negative inner monologues can be destructive. There are any number of strategies for stopping these destructive ideas from rattling around inside your head. You can argue with your self-talk. No, you're not a horrible brother because you forgot a birthday. You can argue with friends as they replay your self-talk to you. They might say, you didn't win the contract, your business is going to fail. You say, I'm glad I applied, tomorrow is another day. I've got a great business, I provide great service, and I'm going to win a contract soon. The second method is more effective, but it takes a good and patient friend to do this well. Some people snap a rubber band on their wrist every time they catch themselves putting themselves down, while others jump up and down while smiling. It sounds nuts, but you do feel better. There are lots of ways to do this, but all of the strategies have two features in common. 1. They make you aware of your self-talk. 2. You start to change the voice in your head. This, again, is hard. It takes a lot of mental effort and attention, and many people simply aren't willing to do the work. Once you're aware of the habit of destructive self-talk, you can, as with any habit, replace it with a new one. Talking positively to yourself will feel different at first, maybe it will come as a relief, or maybe it will just feel fake. But remember that changing the tone of your self-talk won't work if you try it only once. If you want to get in shape, you don't go for a run once or lift a weight once. You have to turn these activities into habits, until the day comes when you feel odd not doing them. Positive self-talk is the same, if you make it a practice, it works. Ultimately, you'll discover that, in tough moments, you've got a voice in your head that recognizes difficulty but still helps you to see possibility. It will become a part of who you are. And please, Walker, don't think you need to give yourself the Gettysburg Address. Don't think you need to fill your mind with happy-clappy nonsense. Effective self-talk is usually simple. It's usually brief, even dull. A phrase is often better than a sentence, and a word will sometimes do just fine. Here are some examples researchers have collected from successful athletes. Good job, do it again. Concentrate, breathe. Stay tough. There is a difference between self-talk that is aspirational and self-talk that is delusional. The difference is not in the words. The difference lies in practice. You can try to talk yourself up before a big contest, but if you haven't done the training, you won't believe your own talk. Self-talk tied to disciplined practice enhances your power. Self-talk divorced from practice is just self-delusion. Master Chief Will Guild talked about getting to your dot to master pain. Remember that the instructors had those frog feet dots painted on the grinder? Where we'd line up for physical training. We'd start PT standing on our designated dot. Well, the instructors found that most of the guys who quit BUD/S didn't quit during training. They quit when they started to think about all of the training ahead. The lesson of getting to your dot is that you don't need to do all of your training at once. All you need to do at breakfast is eat breakfast. And that's a real task. Eat well, get down good calories, because you're going to need the energy. All you need to do after breakfast is to get to your dot, to jog to your spot on the grinder. Once people made it to the dot, they usually found the strength to make it through that PT session. The process of taking a large goal and breaking it down into smaller parts is called segmenting. It's a simple technique, but it can make seemingly impossible hardship more manageable. We break hard things down into smaller and smaller steps until each step is easy. We make the large thing small, and the small thing smaller, and the smaller thing smaller still, until the next thing is the only thing, and that next thing happens now. For example, a person with severe depression might find it overwhelming to get out of bed in the morning. So, don't do it. You don't have to. You didn't have to get out of bed if it's overwhelming. But you do have to learn to ask yourself, can I move my toes? Yes. Then do it. Can I move my fingers? Yes. Then do it. Can I open my eyes? Yes. Can I take in a deeper breath? Yes. Can I put one leg over the side of the bed? Yes. Can I put another leg over the side of the bed? Can I put some weight into my heels? You're out of bed. Remember the second night of Hell Week, Walker? We'd already been up for 20 hours. We'd been running with boats on our heads, swimming in the ocean, running through the obstacle course, carrying logs. It was miserable. We were frozen and pained, but our adrenaline had carried us through the first night and carried us through the next day. Then we arrived at the beginning of the second night. We're thinking to ourselves, I'm more tired and more exhausted and more beaten than I've ever been in my life. And it was then, at the beginning of the second night, that the instructors ran us out to the beach. We stood there in a line, and as we watched the sun drift down, they came out with their bullhorns to get inside our minds. Say goodnight to the sun, gentlemen, say goodnight to the sun. Tonight is going to be a very, very long night, gentlemen. They reminded us that tonight was going to be our first full night of Hell Week. And you men have many, many more nights to go. We watched the sun slip lower and make contact with the ocean. As the sun slipped beneath the waves, something broke in our class. Out of the corner of my right eye, I saw men running for the bell. First 2 men ran, then 2 more, and then another. The instructors had carried the bell out with us to the beach. To quit, you rang the bell 3 times. I could hear it ringing, ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. A pack of men quit together. Weeks earlier, we had started out indoctrination phase with more than 220 students. Only 21 originals from class 237 would ultimately graduate with our class. We had more men quit at that moment than at any other time in Bud's training. Who would have thought, after having to swim 50 meters underwater, endure drown-proofing, and surf torture, and the obstacle course, and 4-mile runs in the sand, and 2-mile swims in the ocean, and log PT, and countless sit-up, and flutter kicks, and push-ups, and hours in the cold and the sand, that the hardest thing to do in all of Bud's training would be to stand on the beach and watch the sun set. It was the darkest moment for so many because they weren't thinking about what was right in front of us. They were thinking about everything that was to come. And in their minds, what they hadn't yet seen or touched or tasted turned monstrous. We went from more than 220 down to 21. I can count on one hand the number of people who quit when they were actually doing something. People quit when they started to think about how hard something was going to be. When things feel too big to handle, break 'em down. It worked for you then. It'll work for you now. You got through Hell Week by staying focused on the reality in front of you, not the phantoms your imagination conjured up or the fear the instructors tried to put into your head. And that's not just a lesson for the SEAL teams. That's how we can make it through any difficult part of our lives. Ernest Hemingway argued that cowardice is almost always simply a lack of ability to suspend the functioning of the imagination. When we make a mistake, we often have to face a tough reality. That's even harder to do when it's accompanied by a tortured imagination. Many of us lose control of our imaginations without noticing. We start with a failure and then pass judgment on our entire lives, our futures, our character. We don't learn from failure by mentally turning it into a catastrophe. We learn from failure by facing it and seeing it for what it is, no more, no less. Face reality. Isolate what happened. Separate what just happened from what might happen in the future. If it helps you, write it down. And once you've looked at reality, focus your energy on the task you can control that's right in front of you. When I was a kid, my dad showed me how to hold a magnifying glass, focus the rays of the sun on a fallen leaf, and draw out a curling wisp of smoke as the leaf caught fire. There is a power in focus. A laser is just focused light, but it can cut through still. In the midst of hardship and fear, suffering and difficulty, the person who's built the habit of focus harnesses tremendous power. You're standing at the edge of the pool with your boat crew behind you. It's early in the day, and the air still runs with a chill. A few of the instructors in wetsuits and fins are floating in the pool. You close your eyes and roll your neck and relax your shoulders. You breathe in and out and then in, long, 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 and out, slow, slow, slow. As you slow your breathing, your heart rate drops. You open your eyes and wait for the signal from the instructors. As they give the word, you suck in air deep down in your belly, and you keep filling and filling and filling until you feel that every last corner, every crevice of your lungs, is packed with oxygen. As you do so, you see other men jump into the pool. You stay calm, this is not a race. You've planned your dive and now you are going to dive your plan. You may be the last man standing on the pool deck, or you may be the first to go. But you jump when you're ready. You jump as far into the pool as a good leap will take you, and on impact you keep your body relaxed so that your feet and then your hips and then your shoulders and then your head cut under quickly, and you let yourself sink 1 foot, 2 feet, 3 feet, and then you flex your core and swing forward at the hips into a tight ball as you do a front flip underwater. Then you swim for the bottom of the pool, and with each stroke. Walker, you recognize this as mental practice for the 50-meter underwater swim. Mental visualization is no substitute for physical practice. In fact, we knew how to visualize only because we had actually swum across the pool, 10 meters, then 15, then 20, then 25, then 30, so many times before. But practice makes you better. Resilient people learn how to mentally prepare themselves for difficult endeavors. To prepare for that swim, you practice in the pool, and, just as important, you can practice in your mind. You can practice what it will feel like when you get to the end of the pool, turn, and push off the wall, when you are absolutely out of oxygen and can't even see the other side yet. You can imagine telling yourself, stay, as you pull your hands through the water, kick, and feel your body shoot forward, then, relaxed. You can imagine swimming deep, a few inches above the bottom, and keeping your eyes open and your face relaxed. In the moment, you aren't going to remember that the partial pressure of oxygen is higher at depth, you won't remember that your rate of oxygen consumption is tied to your heart rate, you won't remember that tension in your body uses strength and burns oxygen. You won't remember any of this, but you won't need to think through what you are doing then, because you'll have practiced it so many times before. Mental visualization, or mental rehearsal, is one of the most powerful ways that we have to master pain, fear, and difficulty. Resilient people know that life is going to be hard, so they prepare themselves for hardship. You remember how the Stoics practiced the premeditation of evils? In some ways, it's the same thing. For Seneca, it was the difference between carrying on and breaking down. Everyone approaches a danger with more courage if he has prepared in advance how to confront it. Anyone can endure difficulties better if he has previously practiced how to deal with them. People who are unprepared can be unjudged by even the smallest of things. So you imagine bad things that might happen, being out of oxygen 30 meters into a 50-meter swim, realizing that you've misplaced your notes when you stand up to speak in public, being told that you've lost your job. Then you imagine how you'll make it through, stay relaxed. Will Guild taught us that when you are ambushed by hardship, when everything is new and difficult, you can easily be overcome by events. Mental rehearsal allows your mind to be in a place where your body cannot be. Mental rehearsal, practiced properly, is simply productive preparation. The Stoics recognized something very basic about human beings: we worry. Today, people tell you, don't worry. That's usually friendly advice, and also unhelpful. People do worry. You worry. I worry. You can try to push fear out of your mind, but you'll find that one day it seeps back in, like rainwater working its way into the soil. It's better to tell people, worry productively. If you're going to spend time thinking about bad things that might happen, then use that energy for a purpose. Go ahead and visualize the worst that can happen. But instead of wallowing in your worries, imagine how you'll respond to them. Practice. Mentally rehearse what you'll do. Imagine and envision yourself making it through hardship. When you mentally rehearse, don't imagine success falling into your lap. Imagine everything: the tingling at the back of your neck, the fear in the pit of your stomach. Your mind is built to prepare for problems. That's more than okay, it's good. The goal of mental rehearsal isn't to fill your head with happy thoughts about the future, but to prepare yourself to succeed in the real world. And one of the ways you succeed in the real world is by anticipating obstacles, including your own fear. When you do that, you tap into a survival mechanism hardwired into the human brain. Imagine a man 5,000 years ago who wakes up and says, "I think I'll take a walk and look for berries. I bet I'll find an enormous patch next to a stream of fresh, flowing water. Let's go." Then imagine his neighbor, who wakes up and says, "When I go looking for berries today, I might not find any food at all. I'd better take some with me. It could be a dry day without water, so I'd better carry some with me. There might be a tiger on the path, so I should walk with friends and carry my spear. Let's prepare." Walker, you and I are here only because the second man prepared and survived. Preparing, mentally and physically, means imagining what might go wrong. It also means imagining how you will react to, cope with, and overcome potential hardship. Don't imagine yourself stuck in your worst-case scenario, panicking and failing in an endless loop of disaster. Imagine real hardship. Then imagine how you are going to make it through that hardship. Both a panicked mind and a resilient mind will engage with fearful, anxious thoughts. What makes the resilient mind different is its ability to direct those thoughts productively. In the SEAL teams we called it contingency planning. Other people might call it worst-case scenario thinking. What if we're shot at as we leave the compound? What if the room is booby-trapped? What if she is wearing a suicide vest? The naive mind imagines effortless success. The cowardly mind imagines hardship and freezes. The resilient mind imagines hardship and prepares. He who fears he shall suffer, already suffers what he fears. Montaigne. It's hard to wrestle with a ghost. You either own your fears or they own you. Fears do their worst work when they knock around in your mind. You can't fight your fears until you put them in front of you. Write your fears down. Make them face you. The minute you do this, your fears will shrink, and you will grow. When you acknowledge pain and allow yourself to feel it, you see it for what it is, and then you are wrestling with something solid. Walker, I've written to you before about Marcus Aurelius. He was the most powerful man in the world while he was alive, and yet, like nearly all of us, he was afraid of death. At least that's what I think when I read his meditations. The book was his private diary, written at night in army camps and field tents, discovered only after he was gone. In it he wrote, for an audience of one, his fears, his worries, his stresses, his reflections, and his maxims for living. He was afraid of being corrupted by power. Don't be a Caesar drunk with power and self-importance, it happens all too easily. Keep yourself simple, good, pure. He was afraid of his own death. See how quick and coarse the drama of human life runs, yesterday a mucous membrane, tomorrow an embalmed corpse or a heap of ash. He was afraid of the death of people he loved. One man prays, how I may not lose my little child, but you must pray, how I may not be afraid to lose him. Did writing this diary of fears make Marcus Aurelius a better man? We can't know for certain. But we are certain that most everyone recognized him as the wisest, most dignified man they had ever met, and that people still recognize his wisdom today. He spent his life wrestling with fears and doubts little different, at bottom, from yours. I knew a boxing coach who had once been a trainer to one of the heavyweight champions of the world. The heavyweight called him one day, and the trainer could hear fear in his voice. Hey man, the chap said, I need your help. Okay, the trainer said. What do you need? I need you to take care of something for me. What do you need me to do? Well, there's this guy, the champ said, he's in the other room, and I'm gonna take the phone in and I want you to talk to him. Who is it you want me to talk to? He's my gardener. Your gardener? Yeah, he's in the other room and he's got this bill and he's trying to overcharge me. The trainer realized at that moment that the heavyweight champion of the world was afraid to confront his gardener over a bill. And that, he explained, was one of the reasons why so many of these men are taken advantage of once they become champions. For all their physical courage, they had never learned how to confront someone over a social issue, an emotional issue, a financial issue. When they became champions, they had to deal with all of these issues at once, and they were filled with fear. Everyone, Walker, has uneven courage. We build courage through the practice of facing fear, and while we may learn to face fear comfortably in one context, we may still act cowardly in another. Walker, you are not alone in this. There are veterans who strapped on body armor, checked their radios, loaded their rifles, stepped into Humvees, drove into the streets of places like Fallujah, kicked down doors with armed terrorists behind them, and yet, because their faces have been burned, they're sometimes afraid to go to the mall when they first come home, because of what kids might say. Eric Hoffer talked about this. Before he started his career as a longshoreman, Hoffer was a migrant farm worker, following the ripening peas northward in inland California. From January to June of 1936, he picked 500 miles worth of peas. String bean season came next, and on the morning, it was time to switch over to the new crop. He remembered how hesitant and anxious he felt. Would I be able to pick string beans? Even the change from peas to string beans had in it elements of fear. Hoffer was a student of human psychology, and he recognized in himself that even this small change from peas to string beans left him frightened. You will be, as we all are, hesitant, anxious, fearful, and sometimes terrified as you make changes in your life. This is natural, even for someone who has been as courageous as you have in other endeavors. It is natural to have uneven courage. It is necessary that you understand this about yourself. We all have pain we've mastered and pain we've run from. We also all have a choice to make: stop running and build a new kind of courage. In the Bible, the ideas of breath and life are the same thing. I'm sure you've heard this line from Genesis: the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. The Hebrew word used for spirit is ruach, which also means breath. In Genesis, it's the same breath that is breathed into creation to give humans life. Breathing is one of the first and simplest things we do. It's also the easiest thing to forget about. Yet people have been consciously thinking about breath, and the way it seems to link our bodies to our spirits, for thousands of years. Becoming aware of our breathing and taking control of it when we need to is one of the most powerful ways to take control of ourselves, especially when we're afraid. We can begin to control the involuntary processes inside our bodies by controlling our breath. The hormones your body releases during periods of stress are the source of your fight or flight response. Your heart beats faster, your pupils dilate, your breathing grows quicker. You may even get tunnel vision or tunnel hearing. Your senses focus solely on the danger in front of you, blocking out the rest of the world. And this works great. It's perfect for fighting or fleeing. If you have to sprint from or fight off a predator, you want your blood pumping, your lungs taking in extra oxygen, your senses blocking out everything that doesn't have to do with saving your ass. But here's the problem with fight or flight: we've invented all kinds of new, modern ways to be scared. And in many of these situations, our body's natural response to fear is useless at best and often harmful. How about the fear of public speaking? Your heart starts pounding, but it's not going to work well if you run out of the room or try to fight the audience. It turns out, though, that your body also produces antidotes to this condition, and their release is triggered by deep, controlled breathing. This means that the relaxing effect of deep breathing isn't in your imagination, it has a physical reality. And it means that you have access to a powerful calming path whenever you hit your body's manual override switch. That switch is controlled breathing. Try this: inhale through your nose while slow counting to 4, hold your breath, then exhale through your mouth while slow counting to 4. Try this for just 4 minutes. You can use your breath to gain hold of your anger. You can use your breath to quiet an attack of panic. You can use your breath to bear pain. There's a reason why, in childbirth, doctors and midwives often tell laboring women to take powerful and rhythmic breaths. You can use your breath to create awareness. There's a reason why meditation often begins with a focus on the breath. You can use your breath to direct power. There's a reason why boxers and martial artists exhale when they strike. Controlling your breathing won't erase your fears or eliminate your pain. But to be resilient, you have to learn how to exercise control over what you can control. At the most basic level, you can almost always control how you breathe. And controlling how you breathe will almost always shape how you feel, how you think, and how you react. And let me mention one funny thing here, Walker. People often grasp for the complicated instead of embracing the simple. They'll spend 2 hours writing about their fears, but won't spend 2 minutes focusing on how to breathe. They'll track down and read an ancient book on character, but won't spend 2 minutes focusing on how to breathe. There are a few reasons for this that are worth considering. The first is that simple tasks offer fewer excuses. The more complicated you make something, the more excuses you create for yourself. The second is that beginning something new, even when it's simple, is hard. It makes us afraid. People introduce complication as a way to avoid beginning. The third is that people who give advice or help, or who coach or teach, often feel that if what they tell people to do is simple, then they won't be considered experts. Some experts like to pretend that they have some kind of special, even sacred knowledge. This is one of the reasons why doctors will prescribe antipsychotic medications, antidepressant medications, anti-anxiety medications, and psychotherapy regimens, but they won't insist that their patients engage in simple vigorous, regular exercise. Of course, people who will not make the effort to control how they breathe have little hope of taking control of larger things. If you won't exercise enough discipline to slightly alter just once in a while the thing that you do thousands of times a day, then you will not have the discipline to change the course of your life. But if you do learn to control your breathing, you will have gained experience in how to control what you can control. If you do learn to bring awareness to how you breathe, you are likely to bring awareness to how you live. And there's a bigger point here, Walker. Resilience isn't just in your mind. It's in your body too. We're all physical beings. Sleep matters. Exercise matters. What you eat matters. You'll be happier if you are healthier. You'll be more resilient if you're better rested. Your physical strength is part of your mental strength. You know all of this, Walker. Most people do. It's not a problem of knowledge, but one of action. So do this. Just breathe, if for no other reason than to remember that you have control over how you feel. You have control over yourself. Suffering isn't only in what we experience. It's in how we process what we experience, the perspective we bring to pain. From the perspective of SEAL candidates at the start of Hell Week, a sunset on the beach can signify impending torture. From the perspective of a tourist a few miles up the coast, that same sunset can be beautiful. Sometimes our perspective is simply a question of who we are and where we are. Other times, we can change our perspective. In those moments, we realize that what looks like a crisis or a tragedy doesn't have to be. Part of what makes many people miserable is simply a lack of perspective. I remember one day when I was living in Southern California, my girlfriend at the time invited me to go with her to Tijuana. She'd spent a few summers working there in what she called the dump. The dump sounded like an awful name for any place where people live, but when I got there, I found out that was exactly what it was. She'd worked in a summer program for the children of families who lived near the trash dump. The dump was a giant mound of rotting garbage, and families squatted in shelters made of wood and mud and corrugated metal in the shadow of the dump. We started our trip to Tijuana in the morning, and on the way we stopped at Coronado. You remember Coronado, a beautiful little island of wealth and luxury. I thought it was a fun community. But like every place that pops with wealth, you found people who were spoiled and unhappy. As we walked out of a bagel shop, I don't remember exactly what caused this incident, we saw a woman in an expensive suit, covered in jewelry, screaming at a man as she got into her luxury car, slammed the door, stomped on the gas and drove away. At the dump in Tijuana, my girlfriend caught up with a 15-year-old girl who'd been in her program. The girl had had her quinceañera a few weeks before, and she was telling us all about it. Her friends stopped by, her mom came out, everyone was smiling. It was clear that the family had few possessions, but they had a lot of happiness. Now, all this sounds very cliched, Walker. The poor happy family. The rich unhappy bitch. The reality is that most people's level of happiness and life satisfaction gains markedly as they rise from destitution, and, some nuns and monks accepted, it's usually only rich fools who praise the virtue of abject poverty. My point here is that, trapped in a pocket of wealth on the island of Coronado, it seemed to me that the woman I saw had lost perspective. This doesn't mean that every time you shrink your shirt in the wash or burn dinner you should say, well, thank God I'm not a destitute child in Cambodia whose legs were blown off by a landmine. But you can probably make time for gratitude once a day. The practice of perspective can keep us balanced in moments of hardship. Sometimes, more times than we'd like, we're powerless over pain, but we always have the power to put pain in perspective, the perspective of whatever good fortune we're still blessed to have, or the perspective of our purpose. When we do that, we start to find ways to bear pain with strength. And at this point, Walker, you're probably beginning to grasp that while I called this letter Mastering Pain, it's really about different ways to master yourself. Very often the world is what it is and will be what it will be. Despite all of our desire and effort, we'll never eliminate unfairness or do away with tragedy. And we'll never really master pain. But we can gain some mastery over ourselves. A few days ago, you wrote me about a major milestone in your life.
Last Sunday, I went past my 90 days of sobriety. My eyes are clear and open wide. The gratitude I feel for clarity forces me to drop my pride and give credit where it's due. The credit belongs with other people and the examples they've been to me. I owe my community.
I've noticed how often the word gratitude has been coming up in your letters. Walker. I think that building this habit of giving thanks is one of the best things we can do to grow in resilience. There's been a lot of research on gratitude in recent years, and nearly all of it backs up what Cicero said 2,000 years ago: it's the parent of all the other virtues. People who practice gratitude are less stressed and less depressed than those who don't. They're less likely to be overwhelmed by bad fortune. They even sleep better at night. One finding stands out: of all the personality traits psychologists studied, nothing did more than a sense of gratitude to promote happiness. That's why it's such a big deal that, even in the middle of a difficult time, you found ways to give thanks. A moment of eye contact when we say thank you, a list of the good fortune we've had this week or this year, a visit to a teacher or a friend or a relative who was there for us at a difficult time, these things make us happier, kinder, stronger. We could spend a lot of time thinking about why gratitude works, but I think it's pretty simple. When we express thanks for something, we call our attention to the good things in our lives. We remember those things that we might otherwise overlook, take for granted, or forget. And when we offer thanks, when we express our thanks to someone or something, we're reminded that we're not alone. What keeps you holding on to your pain? Often, when it's pain caused by someone else, you hold on to your pain out of anger. You hold on to your pain out of a sense of justice: he needs to come and apologize first. You hold on to your pain because part of you would rather be right than happy. But as much as you think your anger is hurting the other gut, part of you also knows that refusing to forgive hurts you more than anyone. The other guy couldn't care less about your anger. There's a great image in the Talmud of the self-inflicted stupidity of this mindset: he who bears a grudge acts like one who, having cut one hand while handling a knife, avenges himself by stabbing the other hand. I love that image. When you're hurt, you really are cut and there's no wishing the pain away. But when you hold on to the pain longer than you need to, it's like cutting yourself over and over again. So you can look at forgiveness in the same way you can look at gratitude: it's an attitude directed outward. But the person to whom you owe the practice is really yourself. It's been said that to forgive is to give up all hope for a better past. In other words, to forgive means to give up your desire for power over what you can't control. Resilient people know how to focus their power. And although the past is outside your power, how you live today and how you live tomorrow are still yours to control. People who are suffering a great hardship often turn to prayer. They are looking for strength, guidance, and perspective. They're looking for solace, for hope. They're not always seeking a promise that everything is going to be all right, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how it turns out. The certainty that we can find purpose even in our pain. Prayer brings together many of the tools of resilience we've been thinking about: gratitude, perspective, an acknowledgement of limits, a reminder of purpose. When things get really hard, people pray. Sometimes people are slightly ashamed of this. They feel oddly guilty, and believe that if they were truly faithful, they'd pray all the time. And they sometimes feel that if they don't pray all the time, they don't deserve to pray when times are tough. I can't tell anyone else how to pray, but I find myself praying more when things are harder. I also find myself drinking water more when I am thirsty, and eating more when I am hungry, and sleeping more when I am tired. And I've finally begun to accept that if I pray more when I am troubled, that's just as natural. My point isn't to recommend that everybody pray. What has worked for me and for you, Walker, might not work for everyone. But I would suggest that what many of us do in prayer is valuable if you want to build resilience. It's valuable to step outside yourself in a moment of reflection. It's valuable to still your mind and calm your breathing. It's valuable to ask questions, think back on where you've been, and search for ways to move forward. Walker, you told me you pray. The next time, maybe you can think about this. Prayer cannot bring water to parched fields, or mend a broken bridge, or rebuild a ruined city, but prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart and rebuild a weakened will.